Recently, my friend had an extra ticket to a concert featuring a renowned classical pianist. I remember getting settled in my seat and excitedly opening the program to see what pieces we would be listening to that evening. And let's just say the titles did not give me much insight. I was looking at a lot of words I was not familiar with. I started to feel a little intimidated and wondered if I would enjoy the concert at all when I couldn't even get through the program without feeling behind. Classical pieces are titled a little differently, and I want to know why. And am I missing something by not knowing what the titles mean? I reached out to one of my YourClassical NPR colleagues to see if she could help me out. I'm Erin O'Malley, and you're listening to Classically Training. Question number 3. What do the titles of classical pieces mean? Well, Val, welcome to Classically Training. We're so happy to have you here today. I have asked you here to join me because I am trying to demystify the titles of classical pieces. And you happen to be a host of a classical radio station, so I'm guessing a decent chunk of your job is announcing the titles of classical pieces to radio listeners on air. So I think you might be a good person to help us out today.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So for those people who are listening right now and they don't know what I mean when I say demystify the titles of classical pieces, I'm going to explain my confusion with an example. So I did a little bit of research and I went online and looked up 3 of supposedly the most prestigious orchestras in the country. And I went to go look at what they are programming for their upcoming season. And here are some of the titles that I heard. Concerto No. 1 for piano, Mozart Symphony No. 40, Carmen Suite No. 1, 1812 Overture, Serenade No. 13 for strings in G major, Bach Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Did I say that one right?
Yes, you did.
So you see what I mean? This isn't just What a Wonderful World or Uptown Funk, you know. These pieces are titled in a way that maybe not everyone would understand. But my first question is, are there people out there, maybe the person sitting next to me at Orchestra Hall who hears toccata and fugue in D minor and actually knows what that means?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are musicians, people who have at least dabbled in music who know what a toccata is and who know what that toccata is. And even people who don't have musical training some people have learned to associate the words toccata and fugue with the piece, the
So you actually know that piece just by me saying the title.
Yes, I do.
But let's say they have never heard that piece before, but they see in their program the word toccata. Are they going to maybe know what this piece would sound like just by hearing that word, do you think?
It's possible, depending on, your level of familiarity with the word itself. I think for musicians and some concert goers, if they see the word symphony or suite, they kind of know what's going to be ahead. Like you mentioned a suite from Carmen earlier. Just like a bedroom suite is a bed and a dresser and a couple of nightstands. That's a suite. It's individual pieces that make a whole. A suite, like from Carmen, is a bunch of individual pieces from Carmen that's presented as a group. So, like if I see suite, I know kind of what to expect there.
So this is something I don't really see in other genres of music. I'm not hearing someone say, I'm going to run home and listen to Kelly Clarkson's 14th Ballad. So why are classical pieces titled this way with words like overture and suite and symphony? It seems like they are being broken up into different categories. Is that what's happening?
They came into these terms were created by the composers who were making them, and they became more codified just with the passage of centuries, really. Somebody called something a symphony, and then more people thought, oh, I like that. I will write something like that. It sort of just built on itself. Somebody didn't just start at the beginning of classical music and say, this is what a partita is going to be. This is what a symphony is going to be. They were writing this music, and then they attached the names to it, and then later people would consciously write something under that name.
When you know what these titles mean, do you think it can change the way you hear these pieces?
I think it might impact your attention. I mean, it can. I will say that, like toccata, you mentioned toccata, it comes from the Italian for like toccare, I think, which means to touch. And so a toccata is really touch. It's all about touch. It's about this fast finger work on the keyboard to show off the virtuosity of the performer and how they explore all over how they wander with their fingers all over the keyboard. If you know that it's about touch, you might focus a little bit more on the performer's hands, and it might impact how you watch that performance.
So it could be a useful skill if you wanted to, maybe hear something new from a piece that you wouldn't have otherwise heard. It gives you kind of a focus point of maybe something to look out for.
Sure, absolutely.
So if someone like yourself knows a lot about classical music, can they listen to a piece and know if it is a serenade, symphony, or sonata without even seeing the title?
Sometimes.
So if we played like musical trivia, classical music trivia with you, and we were playing these pieces that you've never heard before, you don't know what they're titled, could you listen to little chunks of them and kind of take a guess at maybe what words would be in the title?
The easiest one to guess would be concerto. And we'll probably talk about that in more detail later.
Right.
Some of the other ones, symphony or serenade or suite, there's a lot of overlap. So not necessarily.
Do classical composers sit down and know they are going to write, for example, a toccata? Or do they sit down, compose the piece, and then when they're done, they're like, I guess I just wrote a toccata?
I'm going to say largely, not exclusively, but mostly the former.
I want to see if we can break it down a little bit, some of these terms for those of us who are classically training. The two words I saw most frequently when I was looking through the programming were symphony and concerto. So I wonder if we can start with those two as being our little gateways into classical pieces and their titles. So if I see the word symphony in my program book at the orchestra, what can I expect to hear?
Well, first of all, you're going to see a large-ish group of players on the stage. Symphony, kind of the default performing ensemble, is a mixed group of strings and winds, sometimes brass and percussion. The ensembles that are not that, they tend to identify themselves in the name of the piece or in the name of the ensemble. A string symphony, a wind symphony. So there's that, a large-ish group of players on stage.
That's number one.
And then a symphony has multiple movements, contrasting movements. Most often symphonies have 3 or 4 movements, not always, but often.
Okay.
So the first movement will be upbeat, fast. Second movement will be slower, more lyrical. If it's a 4-movement symphony, the third movement will often be a dance, like a minuet or something like a scherzo. I love that American composer Florence Price, instead of doing a minuet, she would use an African dance called Juba dance as the third movement of her symphonies, which is super cool. So there's that. And then the last movement, the finale, is generally upbeat again, so you end with
a big finale.
Yeah, a big flourish, but not always the case, but often, generally.
So symphony, see if I understand, it's our first clue is what we're seeing on stage, how many people are up there, and what types of instruments we're seeing.
Correct.
Second is symphony's going to have different movements, around 3 or 4, and they're going to be contrasting from each other.
Correct.
Okay. I think I can, that sounds clear enough to me. I feel like now, okay, I'll see symphony and I can have an idea of what's about to come. What about concerto?
So earlier I mentioned that concerto might be the easiest one to identify without knowing because it features a soloist or a group of soloists and an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. Now, the word concerto itself comes from Latin, and there are 2 sources. One is concertare, which means to argue, to battle, sort of. And the other one is consentare, which means to harmonize. So a concerto is both of those things. It sort of pits the soloist against the orchestra in, not a terrible, mean way or anything, but just in a competitive way or in a playful way, but also gives them a chance to harmonize. I think a fun thing for people learning about these terms and classical music would be to look up P.D.Q. Bach, who is Peter Schickele's wonderful alter ego, and he actually played up the battle element of that term, concerto, by titling his pieces things like Concerto for Bassoon versus Orchestra.
Oh, that's fun.
So, but you get to hear both, the conflict and the harmonization.
So, Val, I'm wondering what advice you have for someone who is classically training and feeling a little intimidated by the titles of pieces they either hear on air or they go to see when they're at the orchestra and they open their program. What advice do you have for them?
First, I would say, please don't be intimidated. You don't have to know what these words mean in order for the music to move you, in order for you to enjoy it deeply. I don't need to know how a dish was prepared or what ingredients are in it or where the ingredients were sourced in order to enjoy a really fine meal. I just know that it tastes amazing. Second, ask the person sitting next to you at Orchestra Hall. Email your on-air hosts and ask them, we love this music and we want to make sure that you love it too. And we want to make it as easy as possible. I would love to remove the barriers to entry. I know a lot of people do feel intimidated by classical music, and I would love to help break that down.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for helping us learn about the titles of classical pieces. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Not knowing the title of a painting doesn't mean you can't enjoy looking at it, but it can offer you a different perspective that allows you to maybe notice more details or see something new in the background. I ended up really enjoying the concert my friend brought me to, and as I continue to classically train, I'm reminded that it's not so that I can enjoy classical music. That's already accomplished. I do it so I can hear more, and I think this was a good next step. This episode was produced by Danielle Nass. Video production by John Reynolds with technical assistance from Josh Savageau, Evan Clark, and Elizabeth Iverson. Special thanks to Valerie Kahler, Katie Condon, and YourClassical NPR. This is American Public Media, bringing music to life.